Everyone, welcome back to our next episode of CXplorers with myself, Daniel Cheung, and my co-host Jasper. Today, we actually have a special guest, Edvin Cernov, with Rethink CX. Maybe Edvin, just do a quick introduction so our guests know who are you as our guest, and then I can maybe jump into what our topic that we'll be talking about today is.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. Hi, guys. Edvin Cernov here. I am a lead consultant and director of customer experience at Rethink CX. I've been in the customer experience industry for over 10 years and had a chance to lead major brands, major retail brands. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being willing to be our guest on today's episode. I know for the topic for today, we're really going to be asking the question, is the human agent making a comeback? And what does that say about AI's limits in the customer experience space? I know there's been a lot of news lately around like Klarna rehiring support agents to fast food chains, rethinking AI drive-throughs. It's clear at this point, not everything can be automated. I think a lot of organizations, a lot of people, especially using tools like Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, we've seen kind of what that horizon can look like in the customer experience world. And I think the pendulum's kind of coming back to the middle now where it's not just about automating everything, right? Because there does need to be a human element into it. I know on previous episodes and previous seasons, Jasper, we talk a lot about making sure that your machine learning, that any AI technology that you're doing on the back end or the front end, that it's being trained correctly. And I think even in season one, we talked about the McDonald's use case of AIs taking drive-through orders, right? I know KFC is kind of running into that now, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But again, when you look at McDonald's training for any associate that works in one of their locations, it's rigorous. It's also notorious for being one of the best training programs. And yet, when we look at implementing AI in the drive-through kind of order-taking world, is that same rigor and training being developed to train the machines? And I think the reality is no. Right? There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of hallucinations that have been coming through. Some of them funny, but again, at the end of the day, it may not be the funniest for a customer when they're getting 50 ice creams with hot sauce on them, right? So that's really where I think that with a lot of the AI talk, things are kind of coming back into the middle in terms of when can AI determine when we need to bring a human into that. So I think
it's going on full circle, right?
Exactly. And I think, it's like a lot of people worried about the rise of the machines, but now it's really the rise of the human first type of message that we want to focus on.
Absolutely right, and that example, from Klarna, one thing that really struck me the most on that article is what their CEO actually said as to why they would want to rehire right those agents that they initially laid off, because they've acknowledged that AI couldn't match how human performs, right, leading the company to rehire those workers, right, and as an avid fan of AI and technology in general, that's actually quite surprising right now with the human first initiative and companies actively promoting human based support. And I do want to be able to throw a question to Edvin revolving around this, right? So Edvin, why do you think that actually some of the companies are leaning back towards human support instead of doubling down on AI?
I think personally, my opinion is that it's an advantage. Customer experience has always been an advantage if you use it correctly. And I think the more that companies index on AI, you're going to see a natural shift back towards humans. I don't really know if it's 100% because it's better. It could be, but I think a lot of it is a message of differentiation, right? We've always had brands, like one of my favorite brands is Chewy. Chewy, this is not really an AI conversation, but Chewy has always sold a very mundane product, which is just pet stuff. And they're going against these behemoths like PetSmart and all these big brands. But the one differentiation for them has always been customer experience and how they treat their customers. They put the message at the forefront. And I think that these days, the more that everybody talks about AI, the more that everybody automates, the more your customers will appreciate the human element, right? And it will just keep swinging back and forth.
Absolutely, yeah. And to that, DC, for between you and I, from what have you been seeing like in the market and with the events that you're going through, do you think that this type of scenario that's happening right now, is this like a temporary backlash to the technology itself, or do you feel like this is like a long term trend that we're going to be seeing going forward?
I don't think it's like a backlash to the technology. I think the waters are muddied because of social media and influencers really using this also as an opportunity, right? And we've seen with, I think, Hungry Jack's, burger joint in Australia, with
Oh, yeah.
KFC. Um, Again, these are test models. They've trained the reg to really disclose the right information that, hey, this was just implemented last week, a virtual assistant. But again, consumers are leveraging this, as potential areas to kind of go viral, get the likes that they want as well. So I think it's important for us as consumers and as the market to really understand disinformation and misinformation around certain things, because again, but at the same time, I also do feel that a lot of companies, like you guys had mentioned, have really over-indexed on AI. They spent a lot of money onto it, and they expected those results to come lightning fast because it's AI. And when they haven't realized that ROI in a quick enough period, it's scrambling now to find out, okay, how do we bring people back? How do we really look at building the back end the right way and training this, and really doing it in a more methodical manner rather than just setting it loose, which I think is kind of the first round that we saw in like early 2024 of some of
Yeah.
these customer facing AI deployments.
Yeah, I think also, if I could add, there's a lot of customer psychology in this too, right? You have to understand what your customers want. And I think a lot of companies force feed what customers want. They just assume what customers want. So they just introduce automation, they introduce AI, they introduce all of these things, but they forget to ask, does the customer actually want? And when they deploy them, they spend money on them and they realize that people might not use them as much. Maybe they still prefer the human first approach. They have to backtrack. They have no choice, because then you start to lose the customer's trust.
Absolutely right, and really, this notion of understanding where you fit in AI within your organization, I think we've tackled that a lot in this podcast, right? TC, even in the beginning, of season one, right? Really being able to drill down on where you think AI can fit the need, right, between your customer support. Is it going to be a customer facing AI, a support facing AI, or maybe even an agent facing AI? And a lot of the patterns that we have been seeing right now is they usually, shy away from customer facing AI because that has like serious reputational and brand damage if something, misaligns, right? And I think we have quite an example for it. And right now, a lot of them are actually utilizing back end type of AI solutions, right, that enhances workers' daily, workflow and being able to be more efficient overall, right?
And I think another big piece of this too is when we look at not only the demographic of who your customers are, it's really important because you got your Gen Xers, you got your millennials, and you have, your boomers, and then you have like my grandparents, right? So everyone engages in a very different manner, but it's refreshing also to see that, people like my grandparents' generation or my parents, right? They're really starting to see the benefits of AI in their day to day lives, which is important because it gets them more comfortable when businesses start deploying this in a customer facing role. But on the flip side of that is, I think, also really understanding what industry you're in and whether or not what the severity of a hallucination from AI could potentially do, right? If we look at finance, healthcare, right, or even luxury specialty goods items, right, people, or even energy and utilities, right? People's energy at their house is dependent on this, or their withdrawals or their deposits going to their accounts, or maybe just an update in terms of their medical health records that they're getting from a doctor or from a system, right? These things really, I think, are being so highly regulated, having such a detrimental impact if it goes wrong. It's really important that organizations also understand, like, what space am I in, and can I afford the severe impacts if it doesn't go off the rails, right? And I think when we look at retail, like such as food delivery services or drive-throughs, that's maybe the right case to start, right? Because before we start automating transfers of $10,000 and up between people's accounts, right? Just because you got your ice cream order wrong, it's not the end of the world, right? We can fix that, right? But I think that's really where companies really need to check themselves, check the demographics of who they're serving, and then really where are the right cues and opportunities of where they're intaking customer inquiries, where that use case for AI could potentially be first.
I think you also have to stand behind it. No matter what you do, if you implement it, stand behind it. There was an issue, I think, a couple months ago. I don't remember the timeline exactly, but Air Canada was in hot seat because their chatbot essentially told a customer, I don't remember the exact details, but to book a flight ticket and then submit a bereavement form later. And when it came time to submit that bereavement form to get some sort of a discount or a refund for it, the customer service agent said no. And then the organization itself doubled down and saying, actually, you received the wrong information. The agent was correct. Have a nice day. And then the customer, of course, went to social media, went to the news, went everywhere. And that I think is maybe not the biggest risk, like Daniel, you're talking about much more severe, like money transfers or health. But I think even in retail, this could happen. And I think organizations rather, need to treat their AI as an agent. And if they say something wrong, train it. Don't pretend like this is just some beta test, because your customers don't care about your beta test.
Absolutely. And I think one of the elements, right, that a lot of the organizations have to look into is understanding, right, why AI, why does it can't do all of it right now. So they need to understand what's the current limitation of AI in the real world, right? And based from the things that I've been seeing around within the whole industry, there's actually three things, and I think all those three things, Daniel, right? We've talked about this on this podcast, and I think the last one was regarding hallucination. So that's the first one, right? Hallucination and misinformation. So AI definitely has a tendency to make something up, and I think everyone has to embrace that because that's just the fact. And to your point, Edvin, right, it has to be continuously reprocessed and retrained for it to be able to stick to the guardrail and to the limitations and actually to the scope of support that you want it to go through, right? And other ones are misinterpretation of emotional cues. I mean, we all know that, right? We all know that AI is robotic. That's, I think those two are actually intertwined with each other. So there's no AI that can speak to a human as emotionally in depth as how a human to human conversation can be. I mean, I think we've seen some demos out there, but nothing really sticks to how an actual human would empathize. And then the last one is really lacking of contextual or cultural understanding. And I know we've talked about having a specific large language model designate to a specific region or country, right? And that's expensive. I think not everyone can do or train specific language model for a specific culture or a specific region, right? I know there might be some companies out there that has deep pockets that can push these endeavors, but until then, we're all going to be stuck with the biggest players out there like OpenAI, Gemini, who has been using like the general knowledge, general info that it can grab based on the web.
Yeah, and I think what's really lacking to keep that continuous improvement in machine learning going is the adoption of AI. A lot of folks in the corporate world, I think, saw the benefits of it, especially with OpenAI, and then governance policies were put in place, right? And then the reality is, when it comes to robot process automation or leveraging AI for customer experience and customer facing type roles, it may have had good promise at the beginning. But when I talk to certain folks in the industry, I'm like, well, how often do you go back and revisit how you've trained that AI? And they're like, the reality is we haven't. Right. And they're like, I was like, well, it can't learn if you're not giving it any inputs. Right. And that's where
Yeah.
AI's contextual understanding of who we are as customers is very biased and it's very limited because it's based on our inputs and what it can scour through. Right. And the reality is a lot of folks and their social media accounts, their online presence is really a persona that they've created. And the AI doesn't know you, Jasper, you, Edvin, individually, right? It knows you based on what's on your LinkedIn profile, how many articles you've written online. And again, that is only a very small fraction of who we are.
Yeah.
And in terms of our buying behaviors, a lot of those is learned by practice and trial and error from an AI. But if we're not giving it that feedback and helping it understand, as in the Air Canada example, Edvin, right, where that exception may lie, that's a really dangerous piece, right? And I think that's where teams and organizations really need to leverage their subject matter experts within every functional department, whether you're in a learning and development role and you're the subject matter expert in terms of all these types of exceptions and different use cases as you train. The AI also needs that same input. And I think the reality is people are resource short right now because there's been this huge, massive layoffs in a lot of these organizations. And now we're trying to bring it back in to say, hey, we need more of a hybridized type of role where you may run L&D, but you also need to make sure that all of those inputs in your learnings can be transposed to AI.
Yeah, totally. Totally. I think it's also, we're still early. That's the one thing that I think is very important to understand, is that we're still early in this technology overall. And while companies, organizations need to do better to train their models, and and do better with maybe mistrusting them because of hallucinations, because of everything that goes on, the baseline technology of Gen AI is still super early, right? I mean, ChatGPT, or OpenAI rather, just introduced memory, right?
Yeah.
And all of these, in theory, this is of course much more conceptual, but if we live in a world where everything is powered by, say, OpenAI, this type of a memory feature could go very far, and we could start to understand a lot more about every single customer that we serve, right? I mean, I'm thinking a lot about Google and their ads, right? You've heard stories for years of, hey, I just talked on the phone with my friend. The next thing you know, I'm getting surfaced an ad, right? Whether it's real or not doesn't actually matter. The point is that, go back 15 years ago, we would never be able to comprehend the personalization that Google has, right? And that is the personalization that we're kind of talking about. Is right now the expectations for organizations to create that personalization for the customer, train it, feed it data. But there could come a point where everything is simply run on these models, and then it's learning about the customer from everywhere that it visits. That is a future that we could see. It's very possible.
Yep. And I think the healthcare industry is looking at some of those features, right? Because the more data you can collect globally in terms of how to treat maybe type 2 diabetes, right? Some countries may have just a dietary type of cultural nuance that prevents them from getting type 2, right? Or allows them to treat it more effectively. And I think having this global knowledge around what's out there based on your body type, or your health history, that can be really impactful. And that's really where, to your point, we need to see that more in the CX space, right? To be able to understand those cultural nuances, without, regarding where they are geographically, whatever the case might be. And I think the reality is we've also over trusted AI and its capabilities, and that's actually starting to degrade the trust that
Yeah.
humans give clients in terms of their customer experience as well.
Yeah.
And to that, Daniel, I saw a video a week back. I forgot to share it to you, but I'll share it afterwards. They were explaining, that initially they thought that AI would be replacing contact center jobs, because after they've seen the demo, like even with Grok and with the speech to text model, what's like superb, right? Everyone was on the hype train, and then eventually, when they learned the limitations of AI, they actually placed it very simple, like multitasking. AI is super bad at multitasking right now, right? So you're only going to be able to get AI to do what you want it to do via prompt, right? And with prompt, even with you're very like so good at prompt engineering whatsoever, it's still going to be limited with that action. Unlike the requirement that you would have from a contact center industry, agents are required to multitask. They're required to talk, type, empathize, and a billion other things from a quality requirement standpoint, right? AI can't do that right now. So that's why a lot of the work that are being redundated right now with AI is mostly for the research part, right? So everyone can now like do one quick page of a research by just doing one prompt. So all of those tasks, like there's definitely a shift on how people are perceiving what AI would be redundating 2 years back versus from where we are right now.
Do you think, though, guys, that people, this fear that you talk about that it might replace my role, that those that are in charge of training these AI models could be dragging their heels on it deliberately?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. I think the future is much bleaker. Again, you have, like, in the past, this is the past couple of months, the hype of agents, AI agents coming out, right? And it's an interesting thing that I don't really know if I don't know if the use case is really super developed, but the one use case is to train itself, right? Which is kind of where it gets more interesting. I think it's like a band-aid solution. What I've heard is that there is a real risk of AI models running out of training data because they've already fed the entirety of the internet.
Yeah.
So now you have these fairly high-paying jobs out there that are really meant for training the AI, right? Like that is a gold mine. You're getting paid more to train the AI than, say, as a call center agent, which is crazy to me. But I think that process can also be automated, and I don't know if we're that far from it.
And how
I,
sustainable is it? Because we might just run out of knowledge base to give that AI at one point very
you, you,
quickly.
you know what? I do have some inputs on this, guys. I also saw another interesting video when I was doom scrolling with AI when I was in bed. There was a study for a forecast for 2027, right, on where we are going to be with AI. And it's super scary because I think it's one of the leading AI research team who've actually published it. I want to touch back with what you mentioned, Edvin. There's going to be a chance that, or there's actually going to be a future where there's going to be lack of knowledge, and what's going to happen is you will then have AI train AI, right? It's going to be to a part where it's going to be learning by itself, putting together research, and putting through breakthroughs by just going through its own model, right? There's going to be a high risk that AI wouldn't be governed by any type of human intelligence, because it's going to be even way smarter than us, right?
Yep.
When you talk about, like, encyclopedia, right, we can only have so much volumes because that's our limitation, not unless someone goes to the Amazon, finds a new species of whatever insect they're gonna have, right? But this time AI would be doing everything for us, and that's one of the scary forecasts that they mentioned for
Yeah.
2027. So it's really going to be, and I think the last question that they posed there was, do we stop or do we continue? Because that's a scary notion to think about, right? You wouldn't know what AI would be giving to us, to humanity, if it has the capability to be sentient.
Yeah, I've read that research paper. I read it in depth. It was actually very interesting, genuinely interesting, because it almost posed it as every use case that we have today, research, replacing call centers, it's all cute. Like it's a cute use case, because the actual use case is we're building the brain for the robots, right? And you see
Yeah.
this, right? The Boston Dynamics, or
Oh,
Tesla's robots, like those are the physical beings, and we're essentially building this neural network for these guys to function, and then at some point they don't need us. I don't know how doomer it is, I don't know how realistic it is, but that's essentially the TLDR of that research paper.
yeah.
Because I think the scary thing is, right, is as AI trains AI, and we really trust that to interact with our clients and customers, the scary part could be, the AI realizes, hey, I can't actually do this for you because it's out of our policy. Let me rewrite the policy for you right now so we can accommodate this, right? And you can have a billion RAG models to kind of keep it in the guardrails, but there's so many exceptions. There are infinitely more exceptions that happen, right? And I think that's really where it can also get very scary in terms of what that can do. And I think the reality of, Jasper, that question of do we stop or do we continue? When ChatGPT kind of first came out, everyone was like, "Oh my God, we're building Skynet," right? And that was the fear. And yet, the whole industry was like, "Yeah, let's proceed to build
Yeah.
Skynet," right? Because we also see the benefits of that too. So I think, like I always said, right, it's not necessarily just governance on the machines and those reg models, but also governance on the people, how they use it. Because I think a lot of organizations, us included, are really kind of coming back to the middle and say, how do we really approach this from a hybrid type of environment and leverage AI to really be a support and research tool to really guide those human interactions, right? Because I don't think it's at a place where it can replace humans, maybe on some of the more menial tasks, the more repetitive ones. But the reality is, as AI continues to develop, it's not going to want to just do those really menial tasks, right? It's like, hey, I can do more. And I think that's really where organizations, including ourselves, need to really think about how are we using these folks that we have to train it, and how do we create sustainability, and more importantly, how do we build up the training for our humans to know how to build levels of control and regulations for what they're working on within their respective scope.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's why the best use case today, the realistic use case today, is a hybrid model. Let the
Yeah.
people talk, let the AI help you. Let it listen to conversations, let it surface things, let it make it more efficient, let it give the better results, Reddit answers, right? But a human approach is always a good one.
Absolutely, right. HI and AI. I think Daniel and I, we have been super advocate of that model, right? AI for efficiency, and you have human for empathy and connection.
So how do organizations avoid the risk of over automating at the cost of their customers' trust?
I think give choice. I've always been a fan of choice. We can always go back to say, is phone best? Is SMS best? Is email best? I think for me is just offer everything and let people take it. I can give you examples of both. I can give you examples where AI has failed, like an Air Canada example, for instance. But I can also show you where AI works. Like for example, Uber Eats, right? I've never talked to a rep in Uber Eats, but I've also had so many issues that they just automatically refund. So they don't have a human centric support, if that makes sense, right? And that works for them, but I think offer both. Offer your AI bots, but also offer the human beings. And if somebody chooses to go with the bots because they're maybe younger or more fluent or they trust it, let them. But if you have a human approach and you have someone that might be a bit older that has never used AI, not comfortable with it, give them the option to, right? And then at some point you will get enough data to say what is worth to index on more, but don't make decisions for your customers. Ask them to give you feedback on those decisions.
Yeah, that's
That's super
actually
insightful. Yeah, I agree with
no,
that.
I love that.
So then,
And
as a listener, I'm putting my feet in the shoes of our listeners. Is let's say I have an organization, then the next question is, what org changes do I, as a business owner, have to do to empower this kind of hybrid model? Then,
This is going to sound generic, but customer centricity. I know everybody talks about organizational customer centricity, but you have to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. And it's very hard sometimes. We as CX people, I think all of us are CX people. It's easy for us, but think about finance, think about logistics, think about all these side departments that sometimes forget they service the customer, and specifically finance. When you show that an agent's going to cost you $10 an hour, and then you show that an AI response is 5 cents a ticket, there's an obvious choice from a non-customer centricity point of view, because it's all about money, it's all about revenue, it's all about cost savings, right? That's the one thing that I would say is you need to put the customer at the center of the philosophy of your company. When you do that and the entire organization thinks the way that CX thinks, you can have a conversation about it. That doesn't mean that AI gets thrown out, by the way, right? Like it is a tough conversation, $10 versus 5 cents. But have the conversation, because I think right now most organizations are just focused on cost saving, focused on profit generating, and they're not even entertaining the conversation of which one is better.
so they're really looking at this as a replacement rather than an augmentation tool to make the experience better and
I
make it
think
more
so.
customer centric.
I think so. I think it's on us to explain it too, right? I think it's on us CX people to try to explain it too, because even if we don't automate and we simply augment, there is still cost savings involved. There's still efficiency involved. It goes from $10 to $8 potentially, right? Or you need less people, whatever the case is. So we need to do a better job of explaining ourselves as well.
yeah, and I think overall, what this means when it comes to the future of AI and CX, to kind of like piggyback on some of the points that you mentioned, Edvin. Right? It's really reframing that AI is going to be a replacement, but instead it's going to be an enabler. Right, for
Yeah,
your current organization, for you to be able to achieve more. Right, sky's the
yeah,
limit if you give all the tools to your support people at their disposal. Right,
yeah,
and at the same time, when you talk about ethical CX, right, designing it with choice, consent, and escalation, finding that right balance between fluency and factuality, right, that's going to be the key there as well. And lastly, I think it's just really going to be understanding the need of your audience, your customers, right? It always goes back to that, right? So yeah, I think that's going to be a good way to kind of like wrap all this up, right? What are your thoughts, TC?
No, I agree, and I think just in kind of recapping some of the topics that we've talked about, human support is really becoming a strategic differentiator again. So organizations really need to think about how are we using our resources to redesign our customer experience center. How can we really look at AI adoption? To Edvin's point, that's customer centric, right? And when we have those conversations, I think that really allows us to find the best use case for that, or where the human intervention piece needs to come in. And again, really, when we look at hybrid AI models, need to put a lot of thought, design, and oversight into it to really make sure that what we're trying to do with it is serving the customer in the right way and in the safest way, not just for them, but also for the organization as well. Any other comments, Edvin, that you wanted to add, or Jasper?
I think maybe just to wrap it up, I have thought about this a lot and how much AI can really replace us, or not just us, but customer service. I'm not going to be a doomer about this. I'm thinking, I always think back to the escalation to a manager, right? When you call an agent, you call a call center, and someone you talk to, and they give you an answer you don't want, your natural instinct is to talk to the manager. And I always think about that in terms of AI is when you get an answer from an AI about your refund request or a late order, whatever the case is, and you get denied, what do you do? I think it's in our instinct to ask for the manager, to ask for the next step, to ask for the escalation, right? And what is that next escalation? It has to be a human. Otherwise, we as people will not believe you.
Yeah.
So whether you're talking to an agent or you're talking to an AI, when you run into issues, the AI will not be able to help you, right? And that is not a technical issue. That is us as people refusing that answer.
Yeah. To your point, right? I think the human presence lets us as customers know, okay, this company's real and there's someone actually
Yeah.
there, right? Cool. Well, thank you, Edvin, again for being our guest speaker for this episode. Thank you again to our listeners. Feel free to like, subscribe, drop any comments for any suggested topics that you want to get some more insights. And again, Jasper, always, as usual, thanks for being the co-host on this one, and looking forward to the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.